Hi folks, I wanted to record a quick video talking about a little bit of the technical details of the Cherwell archives tool that I've been demoing over the last couple weeks, and talk a little bit about deployment. So, uh, A, how I've been deploying it, how the demo site is deployed, and B, how it can be deployed in your environment and some of the options that I have available for that. So first up, some of the technical details. It's built using .NET, the same as Cherwell, actually a newer version of .NET, right? So if you've been paying attention to the .NET world in detail, you know that there was this thing called .NET Core, and then eventually that just became .NET, right? They dropped the core name, and now there's just .NET. So .NET 5 was kind of the next generation of .NET. There's been 6, 7, and then 8 just came out last week, a couple of weeks ago. Um, Cherwell was written using something called .NET Framework, um, and that's basically just an older version of .NET. So there are some differences between the version of .NET that I'm using and the version of .NET that Cherwell has been written in, but for all intents and purposes, they're exactly the same for purposes of of how we're going to deploy this. So obviously both can talk to SQL Server, both can use the shareable data, not an issue. Um, the version of .NET that I'm using can be deployed in IIS, just like Cherwell. Um, it, but it can also be deployed in Docker. It can be deployed on Linux. It can be deployed on Mac OS. I'm not sure that you would, but I am developing on Mac OS, and there's not an issue, right? So let's actually take a look at how I've deployed and how that matters for you. So here's the demo site. It's archives-demo.thoughtcolony.com. As with all the videos, there will be a link to that in the video description, along with my email address if you have any questions or you want to see this on your data. And just like in all the demos, you can see it does exactly the same. You can browse incident, nothing surprising here. This is all stuff you've already seen if you've seen those previous videos. This is running in Azure, and this is running in a Docker container. I'm actually using a container app in Azure, and it's using if I go over to containers, you can see it's using let me actually bump that up. It's using an image in my container registry in Azure. Everything's in Azure, works totally fine. Same sort of thing would work in AWS if you wanted to use AWS. I'm sure you could probably do the same thing in Google Cloud if you wanted to, but I imagine that most of you are using either Azure or AWS. Same thing would work if you wanted to use Docker or Kubernetes or another container runtime uh, in your local data center on local servers. Um, you could also just run it on bare metal, right? There's nothing stopping me from running this in a VM or actually a true bare metal, like physical machine running Linux. This is .NET Core or, .NET as it's now called. Um, and it'll run totally fine on Linux. Really, it's just a matter of how I package it, right? And if you're interested in running this in your environment, you tell me where you want to run it, and I'll package it in a way that will run there. Also, let's say you were a hosted Cherwell customer and you went with that option because you didn't want to run it locally, or maybe you don't have a physical data center. Maybe everything is in the cloud. That's fine too. I can run this in the cloud. I can run your data in either my Azure instance or your Azure instance or AWS instance. Totally fine. Not an issue. Um, Sorry, the cat's decided to just come in the door, just roll it over. Um, Yeah, so lots of different options. Docker, Linux, Windows with IIS, um, anything's a possibility, and wherever you want it. Obviously, some organizations have constraints where they have to run things on-prem, totally fine. Other organizations want to run things in the cloud, or they have constraints where they have to run things in certain clouds. If you have constraints either way, let me know. We can make it work. Uh, it'll run wherever. It's just .NET. It's C Sharp with Blazor, so that's on the front end. That's Microsoft's new UI framework for web. Basically, the way that works is it syncs HTML across the wire using SignalR. Getting way into technical details. If you're interested, there's tons of documentation on it. You can find Microsoft documentation all about Blazor in more detail than you probably ever wanted to know. It's actually a pretty cool technology. Uh, it I chose it because it makes it a little bit easier to ship around than trying to build a React app or an Angular app or something like that on top of a C sharp app. Um, in my mind, the backend has to be C sharp for the market that I'm obviously gearing this toward, and I wanted to do something that just inherently worked with that backend. So I went with Blazor, and so far it's worked out really well. I hope you agree. Um, Again, if you have any questions, reach out. Emails in the description below. Check out the demo. Link in the description below. Like this video, subscribe, all that good stuff. Since this is a YouTube video, um, and Cherwell's a community. Like I've said, I don't know, last week, 2 weeks ago, um, and uh, I really believe that this is a community. So share it with people that you've worked with, other companies, other Cherwell admins. Um, let's make this thing happen, and let's keep the community going. Um, yeah. See you in the next one.